What should the Dallas Cowboys do with Dak Prescott moving forward? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat over 50 infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com and use promo code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. That is JASE medical.com. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, on today's show, we're going to talk about Dak Prescott, his performance against the Packers, where the Cowboys kind of stand with Dak right now, and then some potential options moving forward. But just really quickly at the top of the show, we should mention there was an article that came out from David Moore from Dallas Morning News. Last night about basically prepare yourself for Mike McCarthy and company to come back. The reason why we mentioned this report is Jerry Jones loves to read the newspaper. He's got a pretty good connection with David Moore. I just wanted your quick thoughts on that before we move on.
Disappointingly expected, I would say, is where I was. I mean, not shocked, not surprised that it's a David Moore article that kind of is greasing.
I wish I could bet on that. Like, I wish FanDuel let us bet on who was going to write that piece first, because I would have bet everything on David.
I would have put half my money on Todd Archer and then half my money on David. Yeah, I mean, look, it feels like as soon as I clicked on the link to read the article that I could have written the article, like I knew exactly what was going to be inside and all the reasoning and all the glad handing. And, there was a very funny like little line paragraph after kind of explaining everything that said, and then there's the financial consideration. And it was hilarious to me because the "and then" was absolutely unnecessary. This whole thing is a financial consideration. We'll talk about the economics of trying to deal with moving on from Dak Prescott, or if you wanted to even do something like that. But I have to believe, and the article seemed to imply pretty heavily, that this would probably be a very different situation if Dak Prescott's contract situation was in another spot, right? Like, I don't think you bring back Mike McCarthy for one more year if Dak had
3 years
4 more years on his contract, 0 years on the contract. I think anything else other than having a 1 year deal, and we'll talk about the terrible money involved in it too, but I think anything other than that situation, McCarthy probably doesn't have the same shot. But I think we all kind of looked around after this. And honestly, I think this is something that we had looked around at earlier in the season. Like, if Mike McCarthy goes, what's it going to look like? I think we all kind of looked around and said, well, he's, Dak's got 1 year left of this contract. There's a lot of things in place here. It would make a lot more sense to do a clean wipe, but I have a feeling that this was the most, if we had to put money on this was a scenario that we probably would have put money on.
I agree. Nothing's official yet. I think the Cowboys generally take a few days before they're going to decide, but that's the way that we're trending. I want to talk about Dak. A lot of stuff going on with Dak. So had inarguably the best season of his career in 2023, an MVP candidate, and then the playoff game happens. What went wrong for Dak in this playoff game?
I mean, I wish I was a sports psychologist that I could tell you. I think for me, it was the very kind of familiar script of just looking disheveled, looking off script from everyone else. And again, it's very difficult at times to kind of parse what is a Dak problem? What is a not being in sync problem? What is a wide receiver issue? Because we don't know the play call all the time. You kind of infer just based on what other people are running or how the route is run, whether you think it's correct. And we don't have all the information, so it's a lot of kind of filling in the gaps. But it just as someone who watches a lot of Cowboys football and a lot of Dak Prescott, it's just a feel, right? Like these games have a feel to them where completing a 5-yard pass is like an absolute chore. It's like the most difficult thing. There are games when you watch the Cowboys and it feels like there isn't anything that Dak can't do on the football.
It feels so effortless, right? They could go out and have a 75 yard touchdown drive with their eyes closed.
And then there are games like this where it's the complete opposite. It feels like doing very basic, 4-yard gains it takes every single thing that the Cowboys offense has to do it. And I don't know like why this happens. Like, I don't know what it is. I think we're all kind of grasping at straws. We're all like, oh, it's the spacing on this route, or it's the Dak needs to come off his reads quicker, or it's and I think that we all are just trying to grasp at straws for what this is. But to me, I have to wonder if it isn't like if a mental processing thing. Not that he can't process it, but that it's a pressure. He's too hyped up, is what we've said before. He's too worked up. He's too. There's no calmness in him, right? And it's just he's too amped up. That's what it is. Thank you. He's just too amped up, and I think it speeds his process up. I think he goes through progressions.
Well, Dak even said that. He said my mind was moving faster than what my body was.
Yeah,
which
makes sense.
It makes sense.
That's what you see. I mean, that's what you're seeing. It's funny that people say, that Jane Slater article came out that said that, oh, if it's not his first read, that's ridiculous. If anything, the problem is that he's coming off his first read too often. And he's trying to get all the way through the progressions instead of maybe allowing plays to develop. I think he needs to slow down his process.
That sounded like a defensive player who's ready for a spot on First Take on ESPN. They already got that take ready to go. What was funny is the first 2 drives of this game felt so similar to last year when they played Tampa Bay in round 1. If you remember that game, the Cowboys didn't gain a yard on their first 2 drives. They didn't. It took a 3rd down play to get their first down on the 3rd drive of the game. The only difference in that game was the defense got 2 stops right away. So you weren't down in a 14-0 hole, but it was like, it just took them so long to get going. And even in this game, their first down came on a Dak scramble. Like, Dak's first 3 reads weren't there. He took off and got the first down. And then they just really struggled. You mentioned it, like, to make a 5-yard completion. And it did seem like, and it took a while, but once they got to the second quarter, and I know the score started to get out of hand, but he did settle down and you saw them actually moving the ball. Now they had the pick 6, which was horrendous, but they had no problems moving the ball the rest of the game. It's just, for whatever reason, these slow starts have killed them, not just this season, but Lane, go look at like Dak's playoff history, 21-3 against Green Bay in 2016. 2018, they got off to a slow start against the Rams. 2021, they got into a big hole against the 49ers. 2022 against Tampa Bay. I don't know how this is happening, but they've got to fix it.
Yeah, and let's make sure we're scoping this issue properly. This isn't just a playoff game problem. This is a big game problem that we have with Dak, right? Where it's not that he doesn't play well, because I think the numbers kind of bear out that if as a whole, he didn't play terribly in any of these games, really. But the problem is that, the game flow matters, especially in playoff games, and like trying to have to like come back, make a Herculean effort to come back. That's not a way to win a game, especially in the playoffs, right? And especially against good teams that are able to kind of keep pace with you and keep you at arm's length once they've gotten a lead. So this has been, And I guess this is why I'm kind of where I'm at with this situation, is that this has been consistently happening for a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the solution is. I don't know that it's a solution that gets solved. Like I was trying to transition to the draft, right? And start thinking about draft prospects. And I start thinking about like, draft needs and that sort of thing. And we need a
I got a theory.
linebacker.
I
Yeah,
got
but
I got a theory on how they could potentially fix it. We'll save it for a different time.
but to me, like, the bottom line is that I don't think the fix here is as simple as, oh, they need a wide receiver or
No,
they need
I agree.
a new offensive coordinator. It's like
I agree.
I think the problem is maybe something with Dak, and that Dak needs to fix in his process. That because it's not that Dak can't do it. It's for some reason Dak doesn't do it in the first quarter and a half of these big games. We have to find a way to get him into the game at a normal, operating pace earlier in the game, because right now it's taking the Cowboys out of these games in which they should have been a lot more competitive.
All right, let's talk about where we stand with Dak Prescott going into 2024 next. This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who is unbiased in your life. So today I want to tell you how I'm really feeling about something you might even be thinking about yourself. I don't know why Mike McCarthy is still the coach of the Cowboys right now. There's clearly a culture problem in Dallas. I think that needs to change. Again, I don't get it. It's been bothering me all week. I know that I probably should get some help trying to figure this out. The good thing is therapy is here for you when you need it. Most of us have much bigger problems than whether Mike McCarthy should be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys or just the Dallas Cowboys in general. But it's important to get some things off of your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's done entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. So visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, all you have to do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the most fun that I've ever had playing DFS because there's so many different players and so many different stat projections to choose from. It's absolutely incredible. Plus, PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return for the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Lena, let's talk about Dak. Where do you stand when it comes to Dak kind of moving forward, and where do you think he is among the other quarterbacks in the league?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is we're at a kind of tough crossroads as fans of him. It feels like, right? Because this was without a doubt his best season as a regular season that we've seen him play. But again, to see the kind of fatal flaw rear its ugly head at a moment when you need him the most is frustrating, and it's beyond frustrating. It's I don't envy the Cowboys, right? Because what they need to do in order to properly handle this situation is make a decision and then make it very quickly. Because as time gets going on, your options are being further and further limited. And maybe that's what the Cowboys want. Maybe they have made their decision, like the David Moore article seems to imply, is that maybe they knew right away that McCarthy was not going to go. But the bottom line is that I just don't see a situation realistically where Dak isn't the quarterback on this team this year.
No.
Unless he would have to give up a trade clause. That we could talk about all the numbers, and we should, because I think it's
Yep.
worth discussing. But I have to think that you're kind of in a situation where you've got to give Dak one more year to try to figure this out, because you're kind of obligated because of the contract situation. But as far as my desire to have him moving forward long term in the future, I'm not saying no at all, but I am certainly not jumping to the yes the way I have been previously, simply because there's clearly something here. Like, we can't continually ignore it, right? And I think that clearly Dak has all the talent in the world to get past it. I mean, I have no doubt that he can get past this. But the question is, will he? The question is, how long do you want to wait until this gets done? And what can we even do to help the situation? Or is this something that Dak has got to figure out on his own personally? Will getting a different play caller in help, or would having a different opening game script, would that help? These are all questions I don't know. All I know is that this situation has pre-existed this coaching staff, and had been through multiple iterations of skill players that we've surrounded Dak with. It's kind of, you're running out of areas to kind of push the blame off of Dak when in this specific situation. And so Dak needs to figure this out, and I don't really know how to help him.
So there's like this common belief in the NFL. There's quarterbacks that you can win with and you can win because of. And I actually think for the most part, Dak is one of the ones that you can win because of, because for the most part, in a 17-game schedule, he's going to be consistently good to great in like 13 of those 17 games. Now, there's going to be a couple weeks where he struggles, and against better teams, they're going to struggle. I just think you have to be honest about the roster. I think if you want to win a Super Bowl with Dak, you probably are going to have a super talented team around him. That doesn't mean that he's a bus driver or a game manager or anything like that. I'm going to compare it to, I got to see Josh Allen play this weekend. That game, it was freezing cold in the game. They had injuries at receiver. Their number 2 receiver, Gabe Davis, was out. Their offensive line had a bunch of injuries. And Josh Allen had like 80 yards rushing. He had a 55-yard touchdown. He was throwing guys open against a good defense. Dak's just not on that level. And he can have a better season than Josh Allen. He can have a better season than Patrick Mahomes. He's just not the caliber of those quarterbacks where in a big game, he can be the sole reason why you win a game. It's probably not going to happen, especially as we go into year 9. But that doesn't mean the Cowboys should move on from him either. They just have to recognize we can't put everything on Dak Prescott's plate, because that's just not the type of quarterback he is.
Yeah, and I think what it is that you need to surround him with the kind of players that when those 3 or 4 games kind of rise up and he's not playing fantastic, that they can kind of help make up the difference until he's ready to like smooth his game out a little bit.
100%. And that's why my belief this offseason, I don't know how much it is about the getting more weapons or getting a new offensive coordinator. I think the number one thing that they've got to fix is they got to get a running game that can actually run the ball against any defense, and that you can rely on in these early games to get your offense going, and not, hey, here's a nice 22-yard run by Tony Pollard and then 3 straight negative runs. Like, they've got to fix the running game, because I do think if they can have a consistently efficient rushing attack, that's what's going to take Dak to the next level. They just haven't had that for several years now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly is going to help him for sure. And the question, I think the question, just to kind of put a bow on this, is that it's a lot like the Mike McCarthy question this situation has been very, very good. But the question is very, very good where we want to go.
No,
right?
no, we've been very good for a decade now.
So, I think the Cowboys are looking at it like we need, we've got one more year of this to try to break through. I tend to think that it's mismatched priorities because now you've got 1 year left of this situation that you're kind of ham-fisting because of that contract situation. You're going to have to go out and get a defensive coordinator that is a different system than what you've got probably. It's just like it just feels like you're giving Dak one more shot on a less good opportunity than what you had even going into this season. So
that's
what's frustrating. Yeah. And he's a year older. That's what's frustrating is that they're not going to probably get the same kind of shot that they got this year.
They're not going to have all 11 starters healthy on offense and have the number 2 seed playing at home. Like, it's pretty unlikely. So I think you have to build a team that's going to be a little bit more, I don't know, balanced. That can go on the road and their style can match up against anybody. Listen, we've got all offseason to talk about what the Cowboys can do to fix this, but I think you and I are both in agreement right now. Like, Dak Prescott, somewhere in the top 8 quarterbacks in the league, not inside the top 3 or 4. And it's a weird spot to be in because you are a very good team, but maybe not quite dynamic enough to make any real noise in the playoffs. Let's talk about some options the Cowboys have with Dak Prescott with their quarterback position next. This episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. I know that we come to sports to escape some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we talk for just a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. That is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling that if my son or my daughter got sick during a supply chain issue and it kept them from getting the life-saving medication they needed. Thankfully, we're going to be okay because of Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, skin infections, among others, stuff that could happen to any of us. So visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It has never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. On tomorrow's show, we're going to answer your Twitter questions. I know there's a lot of people that have been chomping at the bit to ask us some questions. I can't imagine what kind of questions we're going to get, so make sure you tune in for that. Lena, let's talk options here for the Cowboys. First of all, what do we think is the most realistic option when it comes to Dak Prescott?
I mean, I think it's what we talked about, right? That they come back, bring him back 1 year. What's really more interesting than anything is there even any discussion about an extension at this point?
I think it's a lock that he gets an extension.
Well, then I think obviously then we know what the situation is, right? That he's going to be re-signed, and that he'll be.
I just wonder how long of an extension. To me, that's the interest. Is it like a 3-year deal? Is it a 5-year deal so they can spread some of the money out more? That I think that's the only thing that's up for debate right now.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if they try to wrestle away that no trade clause as well. Honestly,
I think it's one of those things. Once you get it in there, it's hard to get out.
Probably so. Which again, like maybe that's why the Cowboys need to. Maybe they need to consider not doing that. Like maybe
not
they
giving
need
him
to
an extension.
Maybe they need to think about biting the bullet here. And eating the money. There's other teams that have done this kind of thing before, but the problem is that now you're being held hostage by this situation.
There's no safety net because they in the last deal, Dak got it out where they can't franchise tag him. So even if he has an MVP season and he leads the Cowboys to the Super Bowl, it's not like you have that franchise tag that you can slap on him to make sure that he doesn't leave. Like, he could leave for the highest bidder and you're out of franchise quarterback.
But I guess my thing about this is that what's more likely? I mean, I hate to be like this, but what's more likely, that Dak wins the Super Bowl and gets the MVP next year, or the situation is similar to the way it is this year, and you're regretting having signed that 5 or 3 year deal?
I don't think they'll regret signing him to a contract because he's pretty consistently shown that he is a top 10 quarterback. And actually, I think the last couple of years he's been better, albeit from the interceptions. I don't think they'll regret it. The hard part is I don't know how you upgrade at all, or you give yourself.
That's the point. You know, like they are, and honestly, with this whole situation, it's they are in this classic Cowboys. I can't get out of this situation where they're good enough that they're selling tickets and everyone's happy during the regular season, and you know they're doing well. They're winning 12 games 3 years in a row, but in order to get where they need to go, they got to blow all the rest of this up, and they're not willing to do that. You know what I'm saying?
I understand. I'm just going to push back a little bit.
Please,
It's really hard to find. I mean, how many of those difference makers are there at quarterback right now in the NFL? There's Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and you can argue like CJ Stroud and Lamar Jackson are better. It's fine. I'm not sure that they're on that level where they can single-handedly win you a Super Bowl the way those other two guys can.
I don't disagree, but I also don't think that the Cowboys are capable of rebuilding the team the way that they need to, while having an aging Dak Prescott and an ever increasing salary cap number. You know, at a certain point, there is value to having that rookie contract. And a high performing quarterback on a rookie contract, right? Maybe even if he's less good than Dak Prescott, simply because you get more opportunity to surround yourself with more talent around it. I guess what I'm saying is that there's a delicate balance between whether your quarterback is good enough to be paid and take your team to the where you need to go versus be a rookie quarterback on a rookie deal and his level. And I'm wondering if the tilt of the situation with Dak isn't starting to go the other way, right? Where it's like, is this
I mean, you might not be wrong, but it's crazy considering how well he played all year long. You know,
listen, I know, and that's the thing is that I'm making these. And again, I'm not advocating for just getting rid of Dak Prescott, but what I'm saying is that we, year after year, we get, drunk on the regular season, and when it doesn't happen the way we want it in the postseason, we're unwilling to make the changes necessary to break through because we can't let go of having a good season. Like we can't put having a bad season on the table as a potential option, because that's worse, frankly, somehow, than what we've been experiencing.
Sure.
I'm pushing back on that, I guess is what I'm saying, is that if Dak Prescott is the thing that is standing between us and reconfiguring this whole thing down to what we need to do, I think that at some point there's going to come a point where that has to be considered, because we can't just keep extending Dak Prescott until he can't play anymore, and then suddenly he retires and you have dead money and you've got a crappy team. That's how you really hurt your franchise. At a certain point, Jerry has to say, enough is enough. And I'm not saying that we're necessarily there yet. I'm just saying that we can't keep ignoring that has to be an option at some point.
And the one player that we haven't mentioned in this entire thing is Trey Lance, who, listen, I'll be honest, like watching the Packers game on Sunday, it's just got me thinking, not that the Cowboys should bench Dak for Trey Lance because that's ridiculous, but I do wonder, like, okay, Trey Lance is the same age as Jordan Love. Jordan Love didn't play the first 3 years of his career. Is it time to maybe give Lance a deeper look? What's also complicated about this is Lance's contract is up after the 2024 season. Do you extend him now to try to make sure that you have him under contract for the foreseeable future? Or do you let things just kind of play out and then maybe draft a quarterback in 2025 if you don't re-sign Dak? A lot to take in, a lot to digest. We're going to be talking about this all offseason long because it's probably the most fascinating storyline when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys. So make sure you are downloading the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Again, on tomorrow's show, we're going to answer your Twitter questions. Send them into us at Marcus_Mosher, at McCoolBCB. Check us out on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. And again, Twitter questions tomorrow as we continue to try to navigate this wild, wild Cowboys offseason. We will see you right back here again tomorrow, everybody.